Diversity is very important because not every human individual is the same. There are differences within the same culture or community. It is important to know about the different areas of diversity because as teachers, we need to be able to cater to the needs of all of our students. The different areas of diversity are ethnicity, gender identity, cultural diversity, linguistic diversity, religious diversity, discrimination, and equity/equality. We need to be accepting of the diversity among our students, and we need to be willing to change our teaching styles and to be aware of things that may be offensive to other cultures that are included in our classroom. My biggest priority as a teacher is that my students feel safe in the classroom and that none of my students feel like they are different and stand out from anybody else. I do not want my students to feel different or excluded from classroom activities. If I know that a student will not be able to participate in an activity, then as a teacher, I need to be able to come up with a different activity for the whole class, or if it is an individual activity, then I need to come up with an alternative activity for that student in order for them to be able to participate. Ethnicity, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is defined as relating to large groups of people according to common racial, national, tribal, religious, linguistic, or cultural origin or background. My metaphor for ethnicity is that ethnicity is a cup of coffee. There is one race, the human race, but there are different types of people within the human race. Just like how coffee is the base of every cup of coffee, but then there are differences that can be added to each cup, such as vanilla flavoring or caramel flavoring. There are even different types of coffees, such as a latte or a cappuccino or a macchiato. As a teacher, I need to be aware of the various ethnicities in my classroom. I can incorporate this into my classroom, for example, by having an International Food Day and having students bring in a food that is a part of their ethnicity. Gender identity, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is a person's internal sense of being male, female, some combination of male or female, or neither male or female. My metaphor for gender identity is that gender identity is a structure. There are different structures, each a different size and shape, but they are all uniquely created, just like human beings. It would be boring if all buildings were the same, just like it would be boring if each person was the same. Students represent different gender identities, and I need to include this in my instruction. I can do this by allowing students to create an art project expressing who they are or how they feel as an individual. Cultural diversity can be defined as the ideas, customs, and social behaviors of a particular people. My metaphor for cultural diversity is that cultural diversity is a shoreline. There are different shorelines. Some are flat, others drop straight off, and some are a gradual decline. Just like there are different types of cultures. Some cultures have more noticeable differences than others. Students represent different cultural diversities, and I need to include it in my instruction. I can do this by having students present a different custom that they may do at home, such as how everybody at Cedarville has to go to chapel. Some students may present on music because there are some cultures where music is very important. I think that students will love this because it exposes them to different ways of life, and they may learn about something that is very interesting or cool, and they may want to start doing it themselves. Linguistic diversity is defined as a tool used by people to communicate with one another. As a part of culture, language helps people to stick together and do things that they may not have done as individuals. Linguistic diversity is a way to talk about various types of traits, including language, grammar, and vocabulary. My metaphor for linguistic diversity is that linguistic diversity is a library. Just like there are so many different types of books in a library, there are different ways of communicating linguistically. in different types of cultures, such as word choice and sentence structure. For example, in Ireland, people say, "You okay?" as a greeting, whereas in America, people would say that as a question asking if something is wrong. Students represent linguistic diversity, and I need to include it in my instruction. I can do this by teaching the whole class a few Spanish words if I have a student that speaks Spanish at home when we are learning spelling words, which will make them feel included, and it will also help other students to learn another language. Religious diversity is a particular system of faith and worship, the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power such as God or gods. My metaphor for religious diversity is that religious diversity is a stained glass window. Just like a stained glass window is made of many different pieces that create the whole window, each piece is contributing and having a job in keeping the window together. Just like in any religion, each person has a role and each person is different, just like how not every stained glass window is the same. There are different sizes and shapes of stained glass windows as well, just like how there are different customs and traditions and ways of life in each religion. Students represent different religious diversity, and I need to include it in my classroom. I can do this by beginning each class period on a day of a religious holiday by giving a little background information of what that holiday is about. This way, students are learning about the holidays of other cultures, and if the student of that certain religion feels comfortable, they can share some information as well. Elementary school students will love to ask questions, and it may make the student of that particular religion feel special. As a teacher, however, I will ask the student beforehand so I do not put them on the spot and make them feel uncomfortable and singled out in the classroom. Discrimination, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is the act of making or perceiving a difference. It is a prejudicial outlook, action, or treatment. Discrimination is an unwanted flower. People that are discriminated tend to look different than anyone else, and they are not desired. Such as the picture of the yellow flowers. This is a type of flower that spreads, and so people burn it to get rid of it, because they no longer want it and it is no longer desired. But people do not do this for any and every type of plant. Discrimination is all around and is never going to go away, just like there's always going to be nature and plants in the world. Students represent different discrimination, and I need to include it in my classroom. I can do this by exposing and making my students conscious of different ways that can be considered discrimination, because especially at the elementary school level, students may not even know that they are discriminating against a certain student. I could do this by reading different books to my class, such as a book about racial discrimination. However, I will first make sure that the parents would be okay with me reading this book to the class. Even if it may not be considered a controversial book, it is definitely a controversial topic, and some parents may not want their students to be exposed to it at school. Teachers need to be aware of universal design in society and within the classroom, because one size does not fit all. Someone who wears a size 7 shoe and someone who wears a size 10 shoe would not go to a store that only sells size 8 shoes. As teachers, we need to create our lessons with disabilities in mind so that we do not make students feel like they stand out. In addition, we need to teach to our students, not to the disability. Lastly, in order to have universal design, we need to have multiple ways of representing something, multiple ways of engaging, and multiple ways of expressing something so that everyone can be involved in society and in an activity in the classroom. The streets of Dublin are very accessible for people who are blind. When the light turns green to indicate that it is okay to cross the street, there is a loud beeping noise that indicates to people who are blind that it is okay for them to start walking. And when they have made it across the street, there are squares that are bumpy, and they can either hear their walking sticks across it and know that they have made it safe, or they feel on the bottom of their feet the bumps so that they know that they have safely made it across the street and that they can stop walking. The gardens in Dublin are also accessible to those who are blind because they are braille, so that they are able to read the name of each of the plants listed. This picture at the Dublin Castle is an example of lack of accessibility. There is a ramp leading to a staircase, which for people who are in a wheelchair is not allowing them to be able to access the castle. However, only after asking an employee did we find out that there is an employee elevator that they will allow people who are in a wheelchair to use in order to get to the second floor. While this may not be convenient, it is an example of accessibility. So people who are in a wheelchair are able to reach the second floor at the Dublin Castle. Again, the Dublin Castle is accessible to those who are in wheelchairs because they have an accessible toilet. This is in the bathroom, and it is a stall that is big enough for people who are in wheelchairs to be able to take their wheelchair into the bathroom so that they are able to use the bathroom. This picture is at Trinity College, and it is an example of accessibility because while there are stairs, they do have a ramp provided for those who are in a wheelchair. You may have to call ahead so that they are able to bring it out. While again, this may not be convenient, there is a way for people who are in a wheelchair to be able to go and visit Trinity College. The mall in Dublin consists of 3 stories. And there is an elevator for people who may be in a wheelchair or maybe on crutches to be able to reach each floor. At each stop along the dart, they say, "Mind the gap." And there is a big gap between the door and the ground at each station. However, someone who is in a wheelchair and has to ride the dart from one town to another can call ahead, and at the station somebody will bring out a ramp that covers the gap so that they are able to easily enter and exit the train. At the museum in Belfast, there is a lift that they have installed by each of the staircases that will allow anybody who is not able to walk up the stairs to be able to get from one level of the museum to the next level. The library in Dún Laoghaire is a very accessible library. There's plenty of space between each shelving unit of books for someone who may be in a wheelchair to be able to go through in order to look at the books. There's also a section of large print books, which is great for someone who may have a vision impairment. The Cliffs of Moher is an example of lack of accessibility. There's a very narrow path that people have to walk on when they are coming and going, and there are also sets of stairs that they would have to go over, and there is no way around the stairs.